Next Thursday night, at 10:33 Eastern, the moon over America begins to disappear. Within 2 hours, almost the entire moon will be gone from the sky. What replaces it is stranger than darkness, and most of the country can watch. You will not need a telescope, dark skies, or anything beyond your own eyes. You only need to know when to step outside, and most people never will. 5 centuries ago, on a Caribbean beach, that exact knowledge decided who ate and who starved. One man knew what the moon would do that night, and nobody else did. So here is the question this whole story turns on tonight. When the moon changes over your house next Thursday, will you actually be able to see it? If you want warnings before the sky moves, subscribe and comment where you'll be watching. Here's exactly what the moon is about to do, minute by minute. Part 1. The schedule the sky cannot break. On Thursday night, August 27th, the full moon slides into the shadow of the Earth. This is a lunar eclipse, and it is nearly the deepest kind there is, measured across its width. 93% of the moon will be buried in darkness. Measured across its face, the shadow swallows closer to 96% of the surface. Only one thin sliver of bright moon survives along the very edge. Astronomers call this a deep partial eclipse, but your eye will read it as nearly total. And the darkened part will not be black at all, it will glow a deep, rusty red. Here is the timeline, and it deserves a place on your refrigerator door. The moon first touches the dark core of Earth's shadow at 10:33 Eastern. That is 9:33 Central, 8:33 Mountain, and 7:33 on the Pacific coast. From there, the shadow chews across the bright face for more than 90 minutes. Maximum eclipse, the deepest and reddest moment, arrives at 12 minutes past midnight Eastern. For Central Time, that is 11:12, still on Thursday night rather than Friday. Mountain viewers hit maximum at 10:12, and Pacific viewers at 9:12. Then, the moon spends another 90 minutes, slowly climbing back out of the shadow. The partial phases finally end at 1:51 in the morning, Eastern Time. Start to finish, the moon sits inside the dark shadow for nearly 3 hours and 20 minutes. Those times are not estimates, because eclipse prediction is among the most solved problems in science. Fred Espenak, the retired NASA astrophysicist behind the world's reference eclipse tables, computed this one. His published figure for the eclipse depth is 0.9319. When he says the shadow arrives at 10:33, it arrives at 10:33. Hold those times, because geography decides how much of this show you get. This eclipse heavily favors our half of the planet, and America most of all. It sweeps across the Americas, Africa, Europe, and even the edges of Greenland and Antarctica. If you live in the central or eastern United States, you hold the best seats on Earth. The entire event, from first bite to last, plays out above your house. The West Coast gets a twist, because the moon rises there already in shadow. We will come back to exactly what that means for you in a moment. Even deep inside a bright city, this event punches through the glow. Hundreds of millions of people will have this hanging overhead on a summer Thursday. But one question makes the whole spectacle stranger the longer you think about it. Why does a moon buried in shadow turn red instead of simply going dark? The answer involves every sunrise and sunset on Earth, all happening at once. Part 2. The light of every sunset at once. A lunar eclipse is, at its bones, the simplest event the sky can stage. The sun shines on the Earth, and the Earth casts a shadow behind itself. That shadow is a cone of darkness stretching nearly 1 million miles into space. Most months, the full moon sails just above or below the cone, untouched. But the moon's orbit is tilted, and a few times a year the geometry locks. The full moon then crosses straight through the shadow, and Thursday is one of those crossings. Now for the red, and the one idea I want you to keep. If Earth were a bare rock with no atmosphere, its shadow would be truly black. An eclipsed moon would simply vanish, swallowed whole, until the shadow let it go. But Earth wears a thin shell of air, and that shell does something strange. Sunlight, grazing the edge of the planet, does not stop at the surface. The atmosphere behaves like a lens, bending light around the rim of the world. That bent light gets steered inward, into the shadow, and onward to the moon. The air does more than bend the light, though. It also filters it. Air molecules scatter blue light in every direction, which is why our sky is blue. Red light, with its longer waves, punches through the air almost untouched. So the only light that completes the journey around Earth is red and orange. Now stand on the moon on Thursday night and look back at us. You would see Earth as a black disk sliding slowly across the sun. But the black disk would be circled by a thin, burning ring of light. That ring is the atmosphere itself, lit from behind by the hidden sun. Everywhere along that ring, it is either sunrise or sunset at that exact moment. Dawn over the Atlantic, dusk over the Pacific, every one of them at once. All of those sunrises and sunsets fuse into a single circle of red fire. That fire is the only lamp still shining on the eclipsed moon. The moon becomes a screen hanging 240,000 miles away in the dark. When you see that red glow Thursday, you are watching every sunset on your planet. The exact shade changes from eclipse to eclipse, and the reason is measurable. Clean air makes the eclipsed moon glow a bright coppery orange. Ash from a major volcanic eruption dims the ring and turns the moon brick dark. Astronomers grade each eclipse's color on a 5-step scale for exactly this reason. Thursday's shade will be a live reading of our own atmosphere, taken by eye. The mechanism also hands you one gift, and that gift is total safety. This is bent, filtered sunlight millions of times fainter than the sun itself. Unlike a solar eclipse, nothing here can injure your eyes in any way. No glasses, no filters, no equipment, just your face turned toward the sky. Today, all of this is understood, predicted, and printed years in advance. Now strip that understanding away and watch the same moon die for no reason. 500 years ago, one man turned exactly that terror into a weapon. Part 3. The Man Who Stole the Moon. June 1503, and Christopher Columbus is running out of ship. He is on his 4th and final voyage, and it is collapsing under him. Shipworms have eaten his 2 remaining hulls into soft, leaking honeycomb. The vessels take on water faster than exhausted men can pump it out. He drives them aground at St. Anne's Bay on the north coast of Jamaica. More than 100 men are now castaways with no colony and no port. The nearest Spanish settlement sits across more than 100 miles of open water. At first, the stranded crew survives on trade with the island's Tano people. Villagers bring cassava bread and fish in exchange for beads and hawks' bells. For months, that fragile arrangement is the only thing keeping the Spaniards alive. Then, the arrangement breaks, and it breaks in the worst possible way. Half the crew mutinies under 2 brothers, Francisco and Diego de Porras. The mutineers roam the island, robbing and abusing the villagers who feed them. By winter, the Tano have had enough, and the food simply stops. More than 100 stranded men, unable to feed themselves, begin to starve. Now watch what Columbus reaches for, because it is not a sword. He has no ships, no leverage, and barely half a loyal crew remaining. But locked in his cabin is one object nobody else on Jamaica possesses. It is an almanac, the printed star tables of the German astronomer Regiomontanus. Those tables were calculated decades earlier, in Nuremberg, an ocean and a world away. Columbus leafs through them and stops at the night of February 29th, 1504. The entry promises a total eclipse of the moon, visible from the Indies. So Columbus calls the local leaders together and delivers a carefully staged message. The account comes from his son Ferdinand, a teenager living through it beside him. Columbus announces that his God is furious the food has been cut off. As proof, God will take the moon from the sky that very night. It will rise, Ferdinand records, inflamed with wrath, and then it will vanish. That evening, the moon climbs over Jamaica, already sliding into the earth's shadow. As the villagers watch, the bright face darkens from one edge inward. The darkened part burns that deep, bruised red you now know how to explain. Nobody on that beach knows about bent sunlight, rings of sunsets, or shadow cones. They only know the moon is dying, exactly as the stranger promised. Ferdinand describes people running to the ships from every direction, arms full of food. They beg Columbus to call off his god and give the moon back. Columbus withdraws to his cabin, announcing gravely that he needs time to pray. What he actually does is watch an hourglass and count against his almanac. Just before the moon begins to emerge, he steps back out, on deck. He announces that a pardon has been granted and the moon will be returned. Right on schedule, to the minute of the tables, the moon comes back. The food never stops again, not once for the rest of the ordeal. A rescue ship finally reaches them in June of 1504. By then, Columbus and his men have been marooned for more than a year. Strip away the legend and look at what actually happened on that beach. 2 peoples stood under one sky and watched the very same event unfold. The only difference between them was a book of numbers and a schedule. That difference bought food, obedience, and in the end, survival itself. The eclipse did nothing at all. The prediction did absolutely everything. Next Thursday, you stand on the powerful side of that same line. You hold the schedule, down to the minute, for your own sky. So the only question left is the one that actually decides your night. From your yard, your street, your city, can you truly see it? Part 4. Can you actually see it? Here is the straight answer, with no wind-up and no fine print buried later. For most of America, yes, and more easily than almost any sky event. Start with geography, because your time zone decides which chapters of this you get. In the eastern and central United States, the whole eclipse stays above your horizon. The moon rides the southern sky, and the deepest phase lands near midnight eastern, that is 11 at night central, late but survivable on a summer Thursday. In the mountain zone and on the Pacific coast, there is one wrinkle. The moon rises in the far west with the eclipse already well underway. You miss the opening act, but you catch everything that actually matters most. Moonrise comes before maximum, so the deepest red unfolds in your early evening. Maximum at 9:12 Pacific is about as convenient as astronomy ever gets. An eclipsed moon hanging low over a skyline is the most dramatic version there is. Now the honest caveats, because a promise oversold is worse than no promise. First, this is a deep partial eclipse, and not a total one. A thin edge of the moon, a few percent, stays in sunlight throughout, so the whole face will not turn red the way it did in March. On March 3rd of this year, a fully total eclipse crossed the Pacific side. Think of Thursday as 9/10 of a blood moon, plus one blazing fingernail of light. Second, this is not once in a lifetime, and pretending otherwise would be a lie. But here is the flip side, and it is what makes Thursday worth an alarm. After Thursday night, the eclipse calendar over the Americas goes strangely quiet. The next lunar eclipse, in late February of 2027, is only penumbral. The moon merely grazes the pale outer shadow, then the dimming is almost invisible. Most people staring straight at a penumbral eclipse cannot tell anything is happening. So, this is the last, obvious, naked eye, wake the kids lunar eclipse for a long while. Miss it, and the sky does not offer a convenient make-up date. The one genuine uncertainty left in this story is the weather over your head. The eclipse is certain to the second, but your cloud cover is not. Late August tends to favor clear evenings across the west and the interior. The southeast runs a real risk of leftover storm cloud on summer nights, and the Gulf Coast, deep in hurricane season, is always a coin flip. Those are tendencies from climate history, not promises about next Thursday night. So, the verdict, plainly, if your sky is clear, you will absolutely see it. No equipment, no expertise, no danger, and no need to leave the city. You get roughly 3 usable hours, timed to the minute, mostly before midnight. The only thing standing between you and the red moon is one cloud, which means there is exactly one number worth watching this week. And despite everything you will hear, that number is not 93. Part 5. The only number that can stop you. This week you will see coverage arguing over eclipse statistics and decimal points. 93%, 96%, magnitudes, shadow depths, ignore every bit of it. Those numbers are locked in place and cannot change between now and Thursday. The number that decides your night is your local cloud forecast for Thursday evening. That forecast updates daily and only becomes trustworthy about 3 days out. Check it Monday, check it again Wednesday, and believe the Wednesday version. Pair it with one more lookup, your local moonrise time for that night. That matters most in the west, where the moon rises with the show running. Then set a single alarm and let the schedule do the rest. East and central. Be outside by 10:30 and 9:30 respectively. Mountain and Pacific. Step out around 9 and let the red find you. If clouds win where you stand, 30 miles of driving can save the night. The moon does not care which county you finally watch it from. And keep the calendar handy, because the sky is not finished with you. Next February brings a double bill across 3 short weeks of 2027. An annular eclipse carves the sun into a ring early in the month. Then that faint penumbral shadow brushes the moon, for those who know to look. But those nights belong to next year, and Thursday belongs entirely to you. Step outside, look up, and watch every sunset on Earth land on the moon.